I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة free word on Al Mayadeen television with me, George Galloway, coming to you from London with an audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. The US presidential election comes ever closer, and most of the world and much of America are wondering whether it's to be the devil or the deep sea that is our fate. I make no apology about laying my cards on the table. I have supported from the beginning Dr. Jill Stein, the candidate of the US Green Party, whom I know and who is head and shoulders above all the other contenders in the race. Now you may say, well, she has no chance of winning, and you need to choose between the lesser of two evils. If you think about it as a matter of logic, only encourages more evil. Because the next time people say, I'll move a little bit further towards the maximum evil, because they've all got to vote for me anyway. Anyone who doesn't want evil has to vote for me because, hey, I'm less evil than the other guy. And that way lies perdition. And people in the United States have been on that path for far too long. I support Dr. Jill, and I will not support either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. That's my position. We'll see what the audience thinks. Now, some people say to me, well, Donald Trump is less warlike than Hillary Clinton, who is a cold, calculating killer. She's not called Hillary Clinton for nothing. She has a long track record. She has a lot of blood on her hands. She takes money from the worst people in the world, both at home and abroad. But we have no way of knowing how dangerous Donald Trump will be. We just know that he is practically an imbecile. We just know that he doesn't know what he's going to say, never mind do, seconds before he says it. He's out of control. So is it better to have a very much in control killer or an out of control potential killer in charge? That's what we'll be seeking an answer to this evening. On economic matters, frankly, there are two cheeks of the same backside, two sides of the same coin. Both believe in the prevailing economic system in the United States, which has beggared tens of millions, plunged tens of millions into immiseration, mass poverty. And if you look at Trump's attitude to immigration, to people of minority ethnic status, Muslims, whom he's pledged to ban entirely from the country, or Cuba, the Obama reforms on Cuba, Trump is pledged to roll them all back, scrap them all. Don't tell me, if you're a progressive, that you're backing Donald Trump because he's less bad than the other one. He's not less bad. He's just as bad. All of which adds up to a major problem for the rest of the world, because one of these people is going to be in charge of 8,000 thermonuclear warheads. One of these people is going to be in charge of US government policy towards Syria, towards Russia, towards the Ukraine, all the flashpoints in the world. And we're going to have to all live with the consequences. So the next 4 years, pray God it isn't 8, are going to be very difficult indeed. Now all the polls point to a Hillary Clinton victory. That doesn't mean that's definitely going to happen. As we in Britain know, all the polls pointed to a victory for Britain remaining in the European Union. all the polls are frequently wrong, as they were in the British general election in 2015. But it's quite likely that Hillary Clinton will win. It is even possible that she will win a landslide victory, which could be defined as a victory by 8 to 10 points. And bear in mind the American electoral system. Whilst the popular vote in the country as a whole might not be so vastly different between the two candidates, if you win in the big states, in the swing states, you pile up electoral college votes and it looks very much like a landslide. Now, there are two additional points I want to make before throwing to the experts. The first is that if Hillary Clinton wins, tens of millions, maybe scores of millions of Americans will not in their heart or their mind accept the result. The legitimacy of a Clinton presidency will be under doubt right from the very get-go. And the revelations that are now oceanic in scale about the conduct of Hillary Clinton, while they might not be enough because they're largely ignored in the US media to stop her winning the presidency, they are bound to come back to haunt her. And of those scores of millions of Americans who won't accept the result, a lot of them have got guns. In fact, a lot of Americans have got guns. And some of the people who will reject the legitimacy of President Clinton if it comes to pass are the craziest people in a country that often seems gripped by a kind of insanity. Racially divided, divided by class, divided by geography. So it might be that we have reached the end of the period in which everybody respected and accepted who won the American presidential election. The other issue is what will happen to the Republican Party. The Republican Party has been taken over by Donald Trump against its will, as it was previously distorted by the Tea Party phenomenon, the alt-right, the far right in American politics, has taken over what was once a quite respectable conservative party, a party that believed in fiscal conservatism, a party that wasn't actually all that socially illiberal, a party that respectable people could say they were a member of. And we've got one such respectable person here this evening. But it now looks to be in the hands of utter extremists, which I believe calls into question the continued existence of the Republican Party as we knew it, the party of Richard Nixon. I never thought I'd ever say these words. Come back, Richard Nixon. At least you were sane. At least for most of your presidency, perhaps not the last days. Is the Republican Party going to survive a big defeat at the hands of Hillary Clinton? These are the kind of issues that we're going to discuss this evening. And you, sir, have the floor first. Go ahead.
George, thank you so much. My name is Io Johnson. I'm a journalist, and it so happened that I was only recently come back from the US the last couple of weeks, and I was staying in Long Island in New York. And I must say, the mood, the fever, the expectations are quite high. I came across all sorts of Americans, people who were supporting Republican as well as Democrats. And I must say that a lot of Americans are supporting Donald Trump, which worried me because he's already talked about building a wall, striking out a lot of Muslims from their country, and he's creating a lot of divide and hate. The concern for me is if Donald Trump were to win, where would that leave the United States? Because everyone's looking to the US, as they've done previously, as a superstate, a country that...
Well, you might be, I'm not.
Well, many people in the West, which is where we are, see them as the lead for that. Be that we have China and of course former heads of states or superstate like Russia still hanging around. But nonetheless, my concern is that Donald Trump sends the wrong signals, be that he's gaining a lot of momentum depending on which networks you're watching. If you're watching ABC, MSNBC, or CNN, Hillary is being supported quite heavily. If you switch over to like Fox News, which is not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, there we got Trump supported quite severely. The worry about that is that the vast majority of Americans, in large droves, watch Fox News. And I think the combined effort of all the other networks, ABC, CNBC, and all the others, do not outweigh the influence that Fox News has. There lies the problem, because if the media, which controls, which engages with its populace, especially that of the United States, which watches exclusively those platforms, if they were then to vote purely on what they've been told, then we could more than likely see a Donald Trump in the White House. And that worries me greatly.
Well, the opinion polls suggest otherwise. We'll hear from Charlie Wolf of the Republicans abroad in a minute. The polls suggest that Clinton is going to win. She's ahead in every poll. There are very few states in which she's behind. Georgia, she's behind by 2 points in the latest poll, but there are very few of these polls. There's a real danger that the Republicans will lose not only control of the Senate, but also control of the House of Representatives. Republican politicians, more respectable ones, are jumping overboard of the Trump vessel even as we speak. People are resigning their positions and so on.
But that, George, that's what we have.
Well,
and we don't have
well,
others.
I won't play that game. I won't choose between the Boston Strangler and Jack the Ripper. They're both serial killers. Why should I choose them? Let's hear from the man himself, Charlie Wolf,
Thank you,
American
George.
broadcaster. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, first off, as far as the thermonuclear issue is concerned, just don't make fun of his net worth and say it's anything less than what he says it is, and then we'll be perfectly safe.
Or the size of his hands,
yeah,
or his
just
conduct
don't do
towards
that.
women.
We're safe, okay? No, listen, I'm voting for Trump, and I'm doing for good reason. It was not my first choice, but it's interesting the way he has shaken things up. A lot of that, I think, is the problem and the fault of the current administration and also the Congress, who haven't been listening to or serving the people. The people are reacting in a way, because they don't trust Hillary. She is crooked. There are mounds of material that's come out through WikiLeaks. I never thought I'd be saying, how I like what Mr. Assange is doing. He was, maybe I'm a bit
doing a great job. Let's be honest.
Call me two-faced if you want. But we've known this stuff about Hillary. I'll tell you what really scares me is, yes, if she wins, there will be people that will be upset. Either way, but especially if she wins, she does not strike me as a uniter. Someone that will go on the TV and say that the people that are for Trump are a basket of deplorables who are xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, and probably other phobics I've never heard of before. That's not how you treat, as was happening with Brexit. Remember, they said we were all a bunch of loonies. Well, the loonies got a bit angry about that and came out and vote. An interesting thing, by the way, I know the polls are talking about Hillary, putting her in the lead. She does have an easier game. The Democrats have a naturally easier game. She has a lot of money behind her, a lot of machine behind her, a lot of experience behind her. But there's a professor, and I can't remember his name. I don't know if you remember this guy. I've seen him interviewed a couple times. He has this formula using certain benchmarks.
He's been right on every election.
Yeah. They looked back. They tracked it backwards to the 1930s, I think it was. I saw him interviewed today on Fox, I'll point out. And again, the guy said, I'm standing by what I say. So I think there's a very good chance of a Donald Trump as president. I don't think it's going to be as bad as people are making it out to be. A couple reasons. First off, we do have a Constitution. And that Constitution was designed because we thought all government officials were crazy and had a lust for power. Remember, we'd come out of this country, out of the United Kingdom, and George III. So there's a separation of powers, and as much as Mr. Obama tried to break through it, even he was constrained. So I think that's important. One of the reasons why I'm still voting Trump is I think both would be constrained by the Congress, whatever party took the lead. They're not going to let them go crazy. But one place where a president won't be constrained is in the appointment of judges, of Supreme Court justices. And that's what worries me. If she takes the balance of the court and brings it too far to the left, that will affect the United States for about, 20, 30 years to come.
What issues? On what issues?
Well, you look at the Second Amendment would be first and foremost. There's going to be a lot of
Guns.
stuff. Guns, yeah.
And, let's call them what they are. They're guns.
Guns. Well, well, it's more than guns. It's the right to bear arms, is what it is, and it's the right to, you know.
Well, they're not bearing bows and arrows.
No, but
you're
but
defending the right of 33,000 people this year, and it's only November, being killed by guns in America.
No, I'm not.
By murder, suicide, or accident.
Yeah.
33,000. If Hillary Clinton changes the court and they make it harder for people to get guns, most people in the world will say it's about time.
Well, that's the rest of the world can think what they want. We're a self-determinant people, and that amendment is there for a purpose, and it's a very important amendment. And also, if you can strike that one down, then let's try the 1st, the 5th, the 4th, the 13th. I think was emancipation. So she worries me. She has a lust for power. I think she will break rules however she feels. I mean, anybody that can put state secrets on a private server and then come up with, you know, I just didn't know, I'm sorry. It sort of reminds me of the old Steve Martin bit on How to Make a Million. You rob a bank, when you're hauled before the judge, just say, I'm sorry, I forgot that robbing a bank is against the law. This is what we're dealing with Hillary Clinton. He also, I think, has a better understanding of business. Now, we've had, unfortunately, the debates have been all slagging matches, principally by Hillary, because she's winding him up. And again, that's trying to use a shiny object, trying to deflect off the debate. So we weren't getting much policy. But the one thing I did hear that impressed me was when asked about the economy, Donald Trump's line was, I want to grow the economy. I want to grow GDP. It's been at about no more than 2%. I think we can get 4, maybe 6%. I want to bring the $2.5 trillion, maybe more, that's sitting offshore back into the country by lowering tax rates. I know you and I will probably disagree on a lot of this, but that's sound economics. Hillary is talking about, I want to tax the rich. Well, the rich have been taxed and taxed. And as Margaret Thatcher said, socialism only works until you run out of other people's money. And it's just not going to work. She's going to do what we've had for the last 8 years. It's not going to work economically.
She has been the recipient of the most gigantic donations by virtually everyone in Wall Street.
Yeah, exactly.
They are the rich.
Yeah.
Why are the rich giving her money if she's going to be bad to the rich?
Well, they have so much of it. Well, here, I'll give you a great point. Look at Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett has come out with this line about what was it, the Buffett rule, I should pay as much as my secretary. I had dinner a couple years ago with the guy who was his number 2, and then he got fed up with Warren Buffett and quit. I still think Warren's a great businessman. But rich people, remember something, don't have to get paid. They can get remunerated in any form or fashion they want, in any country, at any time. They don't need money. They can take shares, etc. So what Buffett is essentially going to do is his declared wealth versus what he's really worth in, say, unrealized profits. And there's a formula that figures that out. I remember Arthur Laffer telling me about that. Is what he's declaring, even in the billions, is still so small compared to what he has. So yeah, listen, I'm going to, let's say I got a hypothetical 100 pounds, I'm going to offer to pay tax, big tax on 20 pounds of it. And the other 75 you don't even know about. That's what Warren Buffett's doing. All right? It's not sound economic policy. This man's a businessman. I think he'll get things done. I think that he's a little bit misunderstood. He puts his foot in his mouth. I grant you that. He has a bad way of sometimes communicating. But he's actually, I've met people, I know people that have met him. They say he's a smart man. He's a gregarious man. As far as women, by the way, he promotes them from within, and he gives them jobs.
Well, this is why I'm surprised at you, because you're a civilized man. I know that. This man is a monster.
No, I don't.
There's much more of this, Charlie, coming up after the break. You're watching كلمة on Al-Mayadeen Television with me, George Galloway, coming to you from London, but discussing the USA, which is a matter, of course, not just of importance to the people of the USA. We took the كلمة camera onto the streets of London earlier to ask the public what they thought. Take a look at this.
What will be the main impact on the Middle East and the world if Trump or Clinton wins? Well, the main impact on the Middle East if Trump wins is a president with absolutely no idea of policy or of any history of American involvement there. I think that would be an absolute disaster. With Clinton, it's a bit less clear.
I feel like if Hillary Clinton wins, things will just stay the same, which is pretty bad. And if Trump wins, I have no idea. That's quite terrifying.
I can't see much for discontinuation in Obama's foreign policy if Clinton wins, being the Secretary of State for 4 years.
Clinton, I honestly don't know much about her foreign relations policy. I think that's mainly due to the Trump escapade. Like, learning so much about Trump through the media, it's kind of dominating the election.
If Trump becomes the president of the United States, I think there will be a huge increase in Islamophobia, especially within the continental United States.
What would be the main differences in U.S. policy in the Middle East after the election?
If it's a Democrat win, I think Clinton's kind of indicated that she wants to increase US involvement in alleviating strain on Aleppo.
I think if Hillary wins, it'll just stay the same. The US will keep on being involved in the Middle East. If Trump wins, I really don't know.
And then a Trump victory, as I said before, would just invoke a more kind of interventionist, militaristic response to any of the crises that seemingly threaten American interests.
Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, as I said about Trump, it could be pretty dangerous, arguably. Like, I think it's a very precarious situation.
I would argue that the main difference would be whether or not we are willing to continue to do some type of warring in the Middle East. If it's with Trump, we will war, without a doubt, because of the fact of the way he has pushed this rhetoric and term into a sense of dehumanization of the people that live in that specific area of the world.
Well, there you go. You see, people are worried about Trump's words, but they're not so worried, apparently, about Hillary Clinton's actions. They're worried, as I am, about his attitude to women, but they seem to have forgotten the attitude of Mr. Clinton to women, which Mrs. Clinton colluded with and trashed the victims of Bill Clinton's behaviour. It's a peculiar election, this one. Yes, sir, you've got the floor.
My name's Gavin Evans. I'm a lecturer at Birkbeck and an author. I never thought that I would be in a position where I'm actually having to debate in favour of Hillary Clinton. But if I did have the vote, I would certainly be voting for Hillary Clinton, and for two reasons. The first reason is the fear of what Donald Trump would bring, the volatility that you referred to. His sexism, the depth of his insecurity, his sociopathic personality. The second reason is that I would like to see a woman as president of the United States.
Any woman? Margaret Thatcher?
That's a good question. Now, a lot of feminists say Margaret Thatcher was a bad thing for women. She never promoted women, and look at the policy she did. And yet, the one thing she did, and I'm a member of the Labour Party, but the one thing she did was that she showed people that it is possible for women to reach the top. And I think that Hillary would be the same thing. I think that's important. There's a third reason why I would support Hillary. And that is because on key issues, I prefer her policies to Trump. And one of those is the Second Amendment. Now, to me, the Second Amendment, as I read it, gave the right of militia to bear arms. It did not give the right of people to own AK-47s that they can go and spray into schools. So I see no reason why anyone should be able to have a handgun, for example, but that's not where we're at. I would like to see more restrictions on handguns in America. And just one other point I want to make, and that's the point that you made about Jill Stein. I remember back in 2000, a lot of people, friends of mine, said they were going to support Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader was a more left-wing candidate, and many of them did support him. The difference between having an Al Gore presidency and having a George W. Bush presidency was the Ralph Nader votes. Now, if those people had not voted for Ralph Nader, had voted for Al Gore, well, a lot of people say he would have been just as bad as George W. Bush. Wrong. He wouldn't have been as bad. We would not have had the Iraq War if Gore had been there. So sometimes choosing the better of two evils is the right choice to make. And I think that I would have supported Bernie Sanders, but the choice we have is one between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and for that reason, the reasons I mentioned, I would support Hillary Clinton.
Well, of course, that's a very cogent set of points that you've made, but the main problem with it is that Hillary Clinton is not Al Gore. I agree with you. It would have made a difference if Gore had become the president rather than George W. Bush. But I'm arguing it will not make a difference if Hillary Clinton wins the presidency. Because Al Gore would not have fought the Iraq War, Hillary Clinton would. She would have, just like George W. Bush did. And she voted for it. She was proud of having done so. She proselytized for it. And then she did the same thing again in Libya, with equally, not equally in terms of quantum, but in strategic terms, equally disastrous results. And she's prepared to do it again in Syria. So actually I think that Hillary Clinton is vastly more dangerous than Al Gore. So I don't think we can make a principle out of this point. There are some circumstances when it's right to vote for the candidate who is not as bad as the other, even if you don't agree with them. But I don't think Hillary Clinton fits that bill. And by the way, I think Jill Stein is a much better candidate than Ralph Nader. But we'll come back to these arguments. Thanks for making them. Who else would like to come in? Yes, the gentleman there towards the back.
Thank you, George. James Thring, Ministry of Peace, peace activist. It clearly doesn't make any difference who we vote for. Well, we're not going to be voting anyway, and the arguments seem to be pretty balanced against both of them. But what does matter, I think, is that it's not the president who makes the decisions about going to war, the things that really do matter to us. We've seen from many presidents that it's really the Israeli lobby in America that does the warmongering. And they pull the strings because they've got loads of money. They can buy the candidates. They can buy the whole of Congress. I think it was a long time ago, at the beginning of the Iraq War, 80% of Congress were supported in one way or another by the Friends of Israel, in other words, AIPAC. So it's important to draw attention, I think, to the fact that that big power in the world isn't run by the president, and as we can see from Obama, he was a good man. He got a Peace Prize for some reason, but he seemed to be peaceful in his machinations and his objectives, and on every turn he was defeated by the Congress. So I would say that we're voting for a chimera here, if we're voting at all, and we must focus the world's attention on the people who are really making the big decisions in the world, in the big power.
Well, you and I, of course, have disagreed on this point before, and we're about to do so again. I believe you're letting people like Obama off the hook by saying that. Obama could have done many things that he chose not to do because of self-interest or because of cowardice, because he's a man of straw. I don't know what exactly the reason is in every case. The AIPAC lobby is a very powerful lobby, as everyone watching this program knows. It's a very important caveat to make that most of the supporters of Israel in the United States are not Jews, and that many Jews in the United States are against Israel. Most of the supporters of Israel in the US are evangelical Christians who don't even like Jews and will kill them on the last day if they don't convert. So that's an important caveat, I think, to make. But the president, if they have the will, the steel, and the ideas, can make a very big difference. Franklin Roosevelt made a difference. He made a huge difference, in fact, gigantic. No one's ever made a bigger difference. And whatever sectional interests or lobbies were around in those days, he must have resisted them. You're not going to tell me that it didn't matter whether Jack Kennedy or Barry Goldwater or even Lyndon Johnson and Barry Goldwater didn't make a difference. You're not going to tell me, are you, that Bobby Kennedy wouldn't have made a better president than Richard Nixon in '68 if they hadn't murdered him in circumstances as yet, all this time later, still unclear? You can't tell me that it made no difference that George W. Bush won the presidency rather than Al Gore. I think this is a counsel of despair with respect to you, as I've said to you before. If you say that nothing that we do matters, that no vote that we cast matters, well, we might as well all give up and just let them do to us what they will. But I don't want to bog this down in a familiar debate between you and I. Who else would like to come in? The gentleman at the back of the room.
I agree with pretty much everything that you've said about the lesser of two evils in these circumstances isn't much of a choice. But whenever we're having a debate like this, you need a clear point of reference. And as an American, if I was in America right now, I'd probably pick Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump over certain issues, Second Amendment, certain civil liberties, etc., etc. But I'm not in America, and my concern with respect to the Americans in this room isn't America, it's the global South, the Middle East, North Africa, and how the actions of the United States are going to affect people that look like me, have the same religion as me, and pray the same way as me. So with that regard, out of the two, between Trump and Hillary Clinton, I think in terms of the Middle East and the rest of the world, I think Trump would be better.
Tell me why.
Because firstly, with Trump, you get what you see. He's transparent in his intentions. He says something, and it's clear. And the thin veil of liberalism can't cover his crimes. He can't trick the people of the Middle East into thinking that he's going there for humanitarian intervention, for instance, when really he's going there for regime change. Well, what we saw with Hillary, her track record, with this liberal identity, she managed to fool the masses into thinking a no-fly zone in Libya would be a no-fly zone, when really it was all about regime change, as we saw from the emails. She's already talking about humanitarian intervention in Syria, and I think that although some of us are clued up about America's role in the world and its imperialistic nature, too many of us are not, and too many of us are allow ourselves to fall for this deception over and over again. So Malcolm X mentions in his book, it's better to be bitten with a growl than to be bitten with a smile. And what we get with Donald Trump is somebody that's going to bite us with a growl, and then we can mount a collective defense and resist against that. While with Hillary Clinton, she's going to smile, she's going to deceive, and the general population within the United Kingdom and the United States sadly will fall for it. Well, with Trump, a 2 million march against Iraq would be 5 million if Trump was at was in the Oval Office. And that's all I got to say.
I think that's a pretty powerful set of arguments. I must say, I'm going to have to win myself some time before dealing with it. Charlie, you sum up your point of view.
Just to respond, I think you're very right. Trump, remember, all sides are against Trump. And that should send off warning bells. It's like when they're voting on the EU, and we had like the Nice Treaty when I was there in Ireland, when everybody except for for Sinn Féin and myself, it was very weird to be in league with Sinn Féin, were against the Nice Treaty, or when everybody, all the institutions of state were against the Leave. That should have told you something. And the reason is he is not part of their establishment. He's going to shake things up. He's not beholden to Wall Street. He doesn't need the money. He's already got $10 billion in the bank. I think, well, first off, he was against going in.
He says so now, but there's video evidence that's not true.
Let me explain very quickly, because a lot of people got it wrong. His line was, I remember hearing was, he said, I was privately against the war, but when the president or the Congress voted, he said it was my duty to support, and that's why he was, quote unquote, for the war. He's not beholden to anybody. Also, his vote, remember, he didn't have a vote, so it doesn't really matter one way or the other. But I think this is the sort of guy that is not beholden to what you consider to be the usual course of affairs. He's not going to fall for different lobby groups. He's also the type that I could see on the first day in office, would sit there, take the financial statements and look and say, Department of Labor, what is that? Get rid of it. You know, whereas others couldn't cut down the size of government. This is the kind of guy that just isn't beholden to anything.
He probably will get rid of the Department of Education. He's not been a great advert for it. In a word,
but he'll
Charlie,
shake it
in
up.
a word, because I'm going to bring you back many times in the course of the debate. Who is the Israel lobby supporting in this election?
Not Trump. They're very nervous about Trump. They were extremely nervous. They consider Hillary a friend. And again, I go by her track record. People say she's got a lot of experience. She does. And all of it's not too good. You know, name the Hillary doctrine. I don't think anybody can. She, you know, and as a manager as well, the management, administrative side of the State Department wasn't good at that either. So the only reason she's where she's at is she just happened to have been Bill's wife. And I don't want to take anything away from her. She's a smart woman. She's a driven woman. She's gone very far on her own. She was not a bad senator, I'm told, in New York, though I probably wouldn't have agreed with her politics. But she's an insider, and she's out for Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. You'll just follow the money. That's all I have to say. Follow the money.
Fascinating. And there's more after this. You're watching كلمة حرة for Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London with me, George Galloway. We're discussing the US presidential election, which is imminent. We took the camera out onto the streets of London at the School of Oriental and African Studies. Let's hear what the people had to say.
Will the minority communities in the US be more active in this election?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I feel like with what Trump has said about Muslims, black people, all minorities, like those people will probably be trying quite hard to ensure that he doesn't win.
Absolutely. And they'll all be voting Democrat, I hope.
I think by his interesting campaign ways, it will have the effect that the minorities.
I definitely hope that they'd take a more active role in trying to fight against Trump.
One would hope so. I mean, I know in some states that Trump's polling at 0% with African American communities.
Has the candidate's behavior undermined the democratic process in the US?
Yeah, like, I mean, what's been said just seems to be lies often.
I don't think it's undermined any more than it usually is.
Yep, yes, he absolutely has. It's just it's a joke. I can't believe he got so far.
When we first heard that Trump was going to run for the election, everyone thought it was a bit of a, okay, well, he won't get anywhere when it comes down to the actual candidates. But it's very scary to think that someone so childish and close-minded could actually get into a position of power that is arguably the biggest point of power in the world.
Has the candidate's behavior undermined the democratic process in the US?
Yes. And I would argue no. Yes, because this is an election we know that whoever gets voted in is going to be there for 4 more years. So the election process has become to be almost kind of a myth to many of us because of the fact that, well, U.S. Americans, because of the fact that, you know, when we vote somebody in, we're used to a smooth process. However, we are not used to getting thousands of WikiLeaks emails that show that the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, were basically committing, I guess, some type of treason against Bernie Sanders. So going forward, I would argue that it still hasn't because the people see that there needs to be a third party. This is a tough question. It's going to take a while for there to be a third party. However, the removal of the far right and the far left and more of a general policy is starting to begin. People are starting to realize the third party needs to be a thing. So I think that at the end, no. It's still a policy process and people believe in it.
I'm voting for him for president, by the way. I think he's the best that we've had so far. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Schvokert. I work for the Morning Star newspaper. It's the only socialist daily newspaper in the English language. And I want to challenge some of the misinformation I hear about who Trump supporters are. And I've heard this echoed in this room as well. Trump supporters keep routinely being painted as uneducated, working class people. Now, there are some supporters who do fit that demographic. But overwhelmingly, Trump supporters come from a higher income bracket, and they are very well educated. I think it's evident here that Charlie isn't of the toothless hillbilly variety that Trump supporters are being painted as. He is someone who is well educated, and I assume well paid as well, right?
Well,
the first is true. The second is completely untrue.
No, this is a myth, and the surveys show so. During the primaries, working class support mostly went to Bernie Sanders, and now it's leaning towards Hillary Clinton. There are examples of areas like coal mining areas in the Virginias, in Ohio, in other states, where people have been left destitute and they are turning to Trump. I'm not going to deny that isn't there. But the most of his support is a certain kind of people we have a name for in America. We call them bros, right? They're entitled, middle-class men who have no regard for the safety and concerns of other people. I'm not saying everyone is, but I'm saying a large amount of them are. And I want to draw attention to something you said to me. I'm not sure if it was during your contribution or if it was during our discussion before the show started. You said you thought Trump was more of a uniter than a divider. Maybe this comes from his slogan, "Make America Great Again." But I'd like to ask you, when was America great for everyone? When was it great if you're a Native American? When was it great if you're black? When was it great if you're a woman? When was it great if you're homosexual? Or of another religion? And I can go down a whole list. And what I see in his rallies is I see a return to 1960s-style racism. I see a lean towards fascism. I see him calling out his supporters to start attacking black protesters in the audience. That's not a uniter, all right? And I have real sympathy with my friends back home, friends of different faiths, different sexual orientations, different races, who can't stand the thought of a Hillary presidency, but are voting for her out of real fear for what Trump is stirring up. It's not by an accident that he's supported unanimously by the far right.
Okay, gentleman there at the back.
So this is Tim Allen speaking. Just coming back to what the gentleman said here, I think obviously it's impossible for anyone who is a progressive to defend Donald Trump, so I won't even try to go down that route. Charlie's done a great job, but obviously from a different ideological standpoint. But I think that I worry that with so much that's come out on Trump, we do forget really what Clinton has been responsible for and what the Clintons as a dynasty have been responsible for over decades. So, I mean, we can really trace back the third way ideology that destroyed the Labour Party in Britain and destroyed social democracy and normalised neoliberalism and liberal interventionism. We can trace that back really to Clinton's legacy, a trail of destruction of foreign lands that has been sold increasingly to the left in America and in Britain, where previously the left would have opposed this, have now got on board since the Yugoslavia, the bombing of Yugoslavia and Serbia, which George details in his film The Killings of Tony Blair. And I feel that while Trump has been so grotesque in the things he's said, and he's really laid them out on a plate, how he thinks of women and how he thinks of Muslims and minorities, it covers up really the detail that there is on Hillary Clinton. In the WikiLeaks scandals, for example, we see how under Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, donors to the Clinton Foundation were routinely favoured in arms deals. After Qatar gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation, which is surely the tip of the iceberg of the financial dealings that the Clintons have with Qatar, arms deals, the value of arms deals from the US to Qatar increased 1,400%. And that's compared with the Bush era. So it's not compared with a pacifistic era before. Arms sales to Saudi Arabia doubled during Hillary Clinton's time as Secretary of State. So I feel sometimes that the Trump circus is distracting from the danger that Hillary offers. And you did make the point there of when was America ever great, which is a fair point, but of course Hillary answered, well, America never stopped being great, to Trump's claim. Yeah, of course, yeah. But I did want to ask a question actually to George. Charles pointed something out to me backstage regarding the polls, which show Hillary running away with it. And he made the comparison to the Brexit referendum, whereby, you know, people, especially after the tragic murder of Joe Cox, people were predicting even a 5-point margin, a 5% margin, so a 10-point victory for Remain. And what he mentioned was what one professor has called the halo effect, where people are ashamed. People were ashamed to say they were going to vote leaving the referendum because it had been tarred as a xenophobic, racist vote. And it's possible. I was wondering if you think it's possible that in the US people are ashamed to say they're going to vote for Trump in polls, and that although I accept that most working class people probably don't support Trump, I think it's possible from what I understand. And I remember George a while ago telling a story about when he was in the Midwest of America and hearing the opinions of the white Midwest blue-collar working class people. There's a whole demographic of Americans, as there was in Britain, that simply never vote, are not in the media, are not involved in politics, to all intents and purposes don't exist for society. But if they come out and vote, having never voted before, the kind of people that don't answer the phone to pollsters, don't show up in any electoral statistics, you can't really do an analysis on that. And I was wondering, will that mean that at the very least the margin of an eventual Clinton victory will be much lower than we expect, even if we don't think Trump's going to win it? And secondly, what would that mean for a Clinton presidency, having only beaten someone like Donald Trump, who, you know, is hardly qualified even to be run in a bath, let alone running for presidency?
Let me answer that point. But first I want to draw attention to something that's not been said yet. When Bernie Sanders was doing extremely well in the primaries, all the polling of a Sanders versus Trump presidential election showed Sanders winning by a very significant margin. That's why the Democratic National Committee had to steal the election from Bernie Sanders, had to distort, contort, and subvert the Bernie Sanders campaign. Because Sanders, if he had been the Democratic candidate and had decisively beaten Trump, would have been FDR plus, actually. It would have been a victory for a man who declared himself to be a socialist, defined himself to be a socialist. So that was an unacceptable outcome for the real power in the Democratic Party. And we know from the WikiLeaks and just from the evidence of our own eyes, Sanders was cheated of that nomination. In my opinion, Sanders should have declared himself as an independent, progressive candidate for president. And he would have got many, many millions of votes, far more than Dr. Jill Stein will get. But the second point is, and you've touched on it, you heard me say it, the truth is, if you're a blue-collar worker in a post-industrial state in the United States who's been left marooned by the Clintons' policy of NAFTA, which is the T-tip of the North American free trade area, by the contempt of Clinton for coal miners, for example. She openly boasted that she was going to close the coal mines and is now asking for votes from coal miners by scaring them about Trump. If you were such a worker left behind by the political class and by Wall Street, why wouldn't you want to do something to express rage and to express rejection of politics as business as usual? And in that sense, this is a phenomenon that is shared in many other countries in the world, including in our own country, and perhaps more markedly in France and elsewhere on the European continent. People hate the political class, and they are absolutely right to hate them. What's not to hate? A corrupt, pocket-lining, warmongering, industry-destroying political class. What's not to hate? Now, my problem is, I think that Trump is exactly the same as that political class. They just haven't been prepared to let him in because he's a vulgar, moronic, misogynistic, sexist, racist boor. So they've shunned him. That's the only reason why he's not sitting in the salons that the rest of them are in. But you can understand the point of view of the voter. If you vote for Clinton, you're rewarding all these people. You're rewarding the people that ruined your life, that destroyed your industry, that sent your son to a foreign war that never needed to be fought, in which maybe he came back dead, or without a limb, or in some other way scarred. Why reward that? And this is my problem with the contributions, some of the contributions that have been made. Nobody needs to persuade me of the ugliness of Trump. But if you say to me, because Trump's ugly, I've got to vote for Hillary Clinton, I've got to say no. I can't do that. And if we keep doing it, this is a point I made earlier, if we keep doing it, we're actually forcing the political centre farther and farther to the right. Because a centrist knows that you're going to vote for them however they move towards the so-called greater evil. But I thought the best point that was made was the one by the young gentleman at the back. We're not Americans. You are, but we are not. In a sense, the Second Amendment is none of our business. We can have an academic view on it. The Second Amendment, or the laws governing abortion in the United States, or the Supreme Court justices and so on, these are obviously internal American issues. They're entitled to make the decisions for themselves about these matters. Our problem is, and it came up earlier in the show, that the United States is held to be the leader of the world. We have to shake ourselves out of that concept. It's not and never has been my leader. I reject its claim to be leader. I reject its description, self-serving description, that the United States is an exceptional country. US exceptionalism. I reject the idea that there's a free world and that America is the leader of it. And that, I think, is the bigger picture. Unless we shake ourselves of this notion that the United States is the leader of a so-called free world, and therefore, because of its exceptionality, has a right to roam around the world like a giant with the mind of a child, I think that we are doomed, whoever wins the presidency. One more segment after this. You're watching كلمة حرة on Al Mayadeen television with me, George Galloway, coming from London, discussing the US presidential election. This is the last segment, so let's get as many speakers in as we can. Yes, madam.
Hello, George. Carol Swords, political activist. I've got a lot of friends in America, family as well, and a lot of them Muslims, a lot of them Christians, and they seem to be voting for Trump. I've argued with them, and they said they're fed up with the political class. They see him as someone who says it, shoots from the hip, and I'm just sort of bemused that they've got this mentality.
The problem is if he's shooting with a nuclear warhead.
Yeah, but what do you do? What do you do? You know, I've got no control over American politics. You know, I've got no control over our politics. But I can't get through to them how dangerous this person is. But they seem to think that they've had enough of the politics. They've had enough of the Clinton administration. They've had enough. And the only way they can see any route out of the evil is to go with the evil, the other evil, that is. So I don't know.
A new kind of evil, an evil we don't yet know.
Yeah.
Wow, what a choice. And they say they're exceptional. Exceptional, all right. Let's pass the microphone down to the front. Go ahead.
Just coming back to breaking away from the political establishment, and some people are looking as a vote to Trump in order to do that. I agree. I have a similar stance to you, George, which is that I'm done playing this game. I'm not going to be voting for either of them. Now, on the American ballot, we have the option to write in a candidate. You don't just have to take the candidates listed. Some people write Mickey Mouse. I was thinking about writing the Democratic National Committee can shove it, but I thought the more professional way to give my protest vote would be to write in Bernie Sanders. And I'm interested to see how many people write in a candidate this term and how many people will vote for a third-party candidate.
Why didn't Sanders have a go? Because this is his last chance. He's much older even than the other two. He had the wind in his sails. He's discredited himself by going around the country proselytizing for Hillary Clinton.
I think in a similar way to the campaign for Obama 8 years ago, people put more hope into a candidate than they necessarily deserve. I did agree with Bernie Sanders on most times. I would have supported him and voted for him. But people take some of their frustrations and see a new candidate and think, well, he'll fix all of these things, whether or not he's accepted that stance or not. Bernie Sanders isn't a revolutionary socialist. He is a social democrat. And I think that leans him to take the side of voting for what he sees as the lesser of two evils, which is Hillary Clinton.
Okay, let's, the gentleman from Birkbeck, go ahead.
Gavin Evans from Birkbeck again. The one thing I wanted to query was that Hillary Clinton didn't win the Democratic nomination. Yes, we've learned that the Democratic National Committee did all sorts of things to try and help her to win, and the superdelegates is a system that is unfair and one might even say corrupt. But the reality is that when it came to votes in the primary, Hillary got more votes, I think it was 2 million more, than Bernie Sanders. And I supported Bernie Sanders' candidacy, but I think the reason that he's supporting Hillary Clinton is because he's a Democrat, and he did not legitimately win the nomination.
He's only recently a Democrat. He only joined the Democratic Party yesterday.
Not a Democrat with a small d.
Okay, good point. Lady at the end.
You actually have 3 Americans in the audience here. I'm one of them.
I'm so sorry, English. Forgive me. You were hiding that under a bushel.
I'm slightly apologetic about it too. I kind of wonder whether the vote that I cast is going to make any difference whatsoever. Whether there really is still a democratic process in place in the United States. And from what I've observed, it seems to me that there was real contender in Bernie, and however the final number of votes were counted, the Democratic Party establishment gunned very hard for Hillary, and they had it in for Bernie. And it seems to me that Hillary is this profoundly unpopular character, and they've gone out in the most spectacular piece of stagecraft and found the one jerk who is less appealing, more stomach-turning and more revolting than she is. And they've really kind of created a scenario where somebody who believes that the world as it's presented to us in the mainstream media is a reality can only in good conscience vote for Hillary because her policies on paper sound altogether more appealing than his do. She's certainly more presidential. She's very polished. She's a career politician. She looks like the safer bet. But the fact that so many strings have been pulled all the way along the way to push her into this position of almost being a shoo-in for this role inclines me to think that the reality is she isn't the safer bet, that this is about a consolidation of power between a small number of families, Bushes and the Clintons, and a progression of the project of war. And personally, I agree with what Jill Stein said, who's the third-party Green candidate, when she said, of the 2 candidates, Hillary's foreign policy is by far the most scary. Because I do believe, I remember being told a million years ago, there's going to be a third world war, it's going to be nuclear, it's going to be with Russia, and it's going to be over Syria. I can't remember who told me that, but it was a million years ago, and I actually think Hillary has been tasked with leading us into that war.
My goodness. What a great contribution. The Manchurian candidate, that's what she is. Yes, sir.
On the issue of foreign policy, which is nicely mentioned there, I mean, clearly I think Trump will make a huge difference across the world. He's already stated to the Europeans that if they're going to be part of NATO, he would have to fine them and charge them even more, so they would have to pay a huge cost to just be joining that club. And I'm sure a lot of Europeans would want to walk away, or he would have to himself walk away from the NATO project. That in itself will fall into the hands of the Russians, who have already been campaigning heavily for scrapping off NATO, especially in its expansion closer to home for them.
You're persuading me. You're pulling me in the Trump direction here.
The Trump would also make a huge difference with Syria. Already Trump has made it quite clear, prepared to work with Iran and work with Russia to be able to work closely with Assad to be able to fight ISIL. I think clearly Trump has a clearer understanding of what the global issues are, and despite he's not my first choice, and if I were an American, I clearly would have to think very hard as to whether I'll vote for him. I think internationally he provides that alternative. And I think finally, if you think about North Korea, Trump has already stated that he would force China to be able to have a tighter and tougher line with North Korea, and he would pull the support he's providing currently with the United States, that is, to South Korea, which would expose South Korea's vulnerabilities. And I think that whole China peninsula would be in question. So I think Trump and his style would change the world moving forward.
Charles, last word to you.
Okay, well, actually, let me just take one quick thing that you were saying earlier about how America's treated, Indians, women, blacks, etc. Yes. It's not a perfect country. It's not a utopia. But what we have, and what makes us exceptional, by the way, and it was de Tocqueville, the Frenchman, who claimed that we were exceptional in 1863 or whatever. But that Constitution is what's exceptional, and that's what's perfect. It's a perfect document for an imperfect people. That's what freed the slaves. That's what Lincoln used to free the slaves. That's what's progressed. Even the women's vote.
It was written by slave owners.
Listen, that was what happened at the time. But remember, there was also a battle between the abolitionists of the Northeast and the South, and they were having to bring the South in. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about that Constitution. But without that document, I don't think we'd have the freedoms we do today. And that's what makes the country great.
My problem with that, Charlie, I'll let you in again. But my problem with that is if you're exceptional, that means I'm less exceptional. That means you're better than me.
No,
why should I accept that?
No, it's not meant like that. It's
exceptional means above the others.
Well,
that's our problem with you.
It's the city on a hill theory, which went back to, I think, Walpole.
But we don't buy it.
Well, you don't have to buy it.
No, but you act as if we must buy it.
Well, no, but
you've invaded 50 countries in the last 50 years in pursuit of this exceptionalism.
Yeah, but it's been for other reasons than just, what you're thinking.
Manifest destiny. You think you can go anywhere?
No, manifest destiny was across the continent.
Yeah.
All right. We
kept on going.
No, we didn't. Hawaii. But no, I think you have to remember, studies have shown this whenever America is weak. No, I'm serious. Wait, hold on, folks. When the times, hold on a minute. Let me finish, because this is true, and there's the data that backs it up. Whenever America is strong in the world, is when countries become. You'll see more freer countries or countries turning to democracy. When America is weak, the opposite happens. You say you don't want America to lead the world. Let me ask you, someone's going to do it. Who do you want it to be? The Russians? The Chinese? Do you want the Chinese? Seriously,
Most of us trust the Chinese more than we trust the United States.
Yeah, but you really think the Chinese, they got the principles? Listen, we ain't perfect, but I'll take our principles over the Chinese.
No, you see, look, I was on a radio station once in Seattle. A famous right-wing shock jock, radio man called Medvedev. You may know him. Oh, yeah, he started out the interview by saying, "Welcome to God's own country, the greatest green country on the earth."
But he wasn't in Ireland.
And I had to, therefore, bog the interview down by saying, you see, this is the problem in the world. You think you can make that kind of a statement. If you're the greatest country on the earth, that means my country is less than you. Can't you see that that's offensive and, by the way, ridiculous?
It's not.
Your country, Charles, was founded on the genocide of the people who were already living there, then built on the slavery of people that look like him and him. I mean, have a bit of humility.
Wait. You forget slavery had gone on since time immemorial. So, it's not like we invented it.
No, you didn't invent it. But I'm saying your country was built on it.
No, but the so-called genocide was also not by, war or what have you. It was mainly by infected blankets from Europe. They died mainly from disease, all right?
Charlie, you're
listen,
rewriting
again,
history.
no, I'm not. Check your history. the majority of Indians died from getting infections that they hadn't had before from Europe. That's the truth. I said we're not perfect. I don't claim we're to be perfect. But one thing that I think people don't understand is we take it seriously. It may sound utopian, wanting to do good in the world, but that's what we are trying to do. We always go out with that intent. You know, there are guys, American soldiers, as with British soldiers, sitting in some of these countries, and they're losing their lives, and they're down there to serve. Now, our leadership may not be perfect, and we probably screw up a lot of stuff, but the average American sees themselves in a place in the world where they have been blessed with that Constitution, and it puts upon them a duty to try and help and bless others. And I think we've done a pretty good job in how we've built the economy around the world, inventions we've given the world, science discoveries, medical discoveries. So I think we've got more in the plus than we have in the negative.
Nobody's disputing America's genuine achievements in the fields that you mentioned. You do know that you killed 3 million people in Indochina. You do know that you drowned Vietnam in Agent Orange, chemical weapons. You do know that you led an invasion of Iraq, which killed 1 million people, created ISIS, which is now cascading everywhere in the world. And I could go on, believe me.
I'm sure you could, but you could also bring up the communists in Iraq, the Soviet Union. How many people were killed there in Siberia? Look at the Chinese.
The Soviet Union didn't dump Agent Orange on Vietnam. It was you.
No, but remember, wait, hold on. But remember, in the case of Agent Orange, that was not known for what it did. It was a defoliant, and no, it was used as a defoliant, and that's what it was considered to be.
Charlie,
and it was. Hold on. Let me just finish the one quick point. Quick point, and then I'll let you. It was, of course, Americans that brought it to the attention, because we have a free society, that they're the ones that bring it up.
We're supposed to thank you for that? That you brought it to our attention that you killed 3 million Vietnamese?
No, but listen, like I said...
You made all these movies about how bad your soldiers had been forced to behave?
Listen, like I said, it ain't a perfect society, but that system
That's
and that
the truest
document...
thing you've said tonight.
That document, though, is...
Let this lady in, because she's not been in.
My name is Amina. I'm from Nicaragua. I'm a human rights defender. And I remember Ronald Reagan invading my country. I remember as it was just this moment when I have to run away half naked with my little cousins in the middle of the bombing of my city. So why doesn't United States just worry about their internal problems and leave the rest of the world alone? Because we don't need you. We don't need you.
I think, Amina, that is the perfect place to bring this discussion to an end. No, Charles, we've run out of time. We've run out of time. We didn't come up with an answer, maybe because there isn't one. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. Come back.